Um, Before we get started on our next panel, there's been a few programmatic adjustments in terms of time. Um, so the next, the concurrent sessions will begin at 2:30 and they'll run to 3:40. So the concurrent sessions will go from 2:30 to 3:40. The plenary on the power of art will run from 3:50 to 5:10. The plenary on the 21st century landscape of injustice, that will run from 5:20 to 6:35. All right? And if you have any questions, please see one of us. So without further ado, we would like to I guess all the panelists are here. We would like to begin with what will be an electric and provocative and thought-provoking panel on the politics in the age of Obama, the power and limits of electoral strategies. And this panel will be moderated by activist and assistant professor at Princeton University, Keeanga Taylor. So thank you.
Hey everyone, like Marco just said, this is the politics in the age of Obama, the power and limits of electoral strategies. My name is Keeanga Yamata Taylor, and it's my pleasure to be able to introduce and moderate the impressive panel that we have today on such a critical topic as this. We have a full panel and a huge topic, and so I want to briefly introduce the panelists while drawing everyone's attention to the program for more in-depth background on their full body of work. But for the sake of brevity and time, I want to give brief introductions to each of them, make a few brief introductory comments, and then open it up for each of our panelists to speak for about 5 minutes as introductory remarks, and then we'll open up a more broad discussion that will include all of you and a hopefully meaningful dialogue between the panelists and the audience. To begin with, we have Che Rhymefest Smith, who is a Grammy Award-winning hip-hop artist and political activist here in Chicago. We have Kali Akuno, who was active with the late Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi, and who is also part of the 1% tax strategy. Amisha Patel, who is active in a Chicago organization called the Grassroots Collaborative. Yahuru Williams, professor and director of Black Studies at Fairfield University in Connecticut. And Rosa Clemente, former Green Party vice president candidate and PhD candidate at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And like I said, I'm going to make a few brief introductory comments, hopefully to frame some of the discussion, and then we will kick off with Rhymefest. Securing the right to vote across the South was an obvious focal point of Freedom Summer in 1964 and the Civil Rights Movement more generally. That right was intended to affirm the inclusion of African Americans into the American polity as active citizens in the making and shaping of local, state, and national politics. And since then, every election season, African Americans are implored by elder blacks and many black civic organizations to exercise the right to vote because so many people fought and died for that right. And while these advocates are invoking the general struggle across the South, they are also speaking poignantly about Mississippi and the events surrounding Freedom Summer. It is certainly true that black and white activists and indigenous black folk across the region gave their lives so that black people could transcend their second-class citizenship. But to reduce that struggle simply to the act of voting, and not more robustly and broadly as a struggle for equality and freedom, is to invest too much in an enterprise that has delivered precious little to the vast majority of African Americans and exploited in general. right to vote, or even the need to protect, defend, and extend that right. But it is to recognize that while a heroic struggle was unfolding, demanding the franchise in the South, in the North and Western United States, where voting was legal and virtually unencumbered, the perils of poverty, unemployment, substandard housing, poorly funded schools, and police terrorism were defining features in the lives of non-white people, and for which no referendum or ballot could fully transform. This did not then, nor does it today, render the franchise irrelevant, but it does suggest that it is not enough to implore our people to vote because someone died for that right. Rather, we must also ask, for what and for whom are we voting? The two parties that reign over the American political system have demonstrated utter contempt for African Americans. The Republican Party's boorish racism has been on display for some time and hardly needs to be said. But the Democratic Party, even with a black man at its helm, celebrates its lack of a black agenda as a badge of honor to demonstrate the absence of African American influence over the direction of the party. The absence of such an agenda is not a passive omission, but it is actively injurious. In Chicago, for example, in this city, Mayor Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff for Obama and a high-ranking operative in the Democratic Party, after receiving 60% of the black vote to get into office, proceeded to close 52 schools on the south and west sides of Chicago, the largest number of school closings in a single act in American history. These types of attacks on the public sector and the people who rely on the public sector, who are overwhelmingly black and brown, is happening in every city in the United States. These cuts are also happening while the rich continue to grow unprecedented wealth. The reality and disgust with it have opened up the possibility of electoral challenges as the differences between the two parties become increasingly indistinguishable. From Kosama Sawant in Seattle to Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi, and other electoral challenges that are underway now. How can we use the electoral platform to raise the issues that affect ordinary people while also creating the space and opportunity for new electoral formations and organizations and parties to arise and develop? Moreover, how will these electoral endeavors contribute to the necessary development of social movements that can challenge an economic and political order that prizes capital over human life? We still face many of the conditions that transformed SNCC activists in 1964 to black, brown, and white revolutionaries by 1968. And none of those issues are ever on the ballot. From US imperialism to record levels of poverty, to mass incarceration, to evictions and foreclosures. Their persistence demonstrate the limits of electoral politics, but in the process of building the kinds of movements needed to challenge these phenomena, we must ask what role can electoral challenges in the form of independent politics play in creating the kind of movement to make the better world we all seek possible. Thank you. Next.